Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
and Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
One core belief of our brand is that money is only a tool to help you build the life you love. It can be really challenging to be excited about money and to be motivated to be responsible with your money. But I know for me, shifting my mindset around money to really treating it like a tool to live a really big and full life completely changed the game for me in my early 20s and was so motivating to me to hit bigger financial goals. In this episode, we're chatting all things financial goals and how money helps you create and live your dream life.
I feel like it's been cool to see how things have shifted for us in terms of how we view money. Just thinking back to even when we first kind of connected on social media and the content we were creating and the life that we were building for ourselves at that moment in time versus the life that we're building now, and even conversations we've had offline about what we want to do with our money and how we want our businesses to grow and how we want our lives to change. It's been cool to see that, and also just personally self-reflecting and being how did I view this 3, 5, 10 years ago versus now has been, because now I'm 25, so I feel like I can actually be wow, over the last decade things have changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm at the age where I'm crap, when you're 15, you don't remember what happened 10 years ago, but now that I'm 25, I'm I know what happened when I was 15. I know what I thought when I was 15. I had adult thoughts then, and realizing how my perspectives have shifted is really fascinating to kind of see unfold.
Yeah, it's cool to just see the different role that money plays in your life at different points in your life. And I feel like this journey really started for me at the beginning of college, but maybe not for the reason that you would expect. I feel like before that, money, I was always very cognizant of money. I was always okay, I'm going to go to X college because that's the college that's going to put me in the least amount of student loan debt. I had a general understanding of the role that money played in your life, but I feel like it wasn't really tangible for me until college because that's when you become an adult. But the first, I would say, big financial goal that I ever set in my life was when I wanted to study abroad for a semester in college. We talk a lot about the solution oriented mindset on the podcast, and when I was a freshman in college, I wanted to transfer schools, but it just really didn't make sense from a financial or an academic standpoint. So instead I was well, if I can't transfer schools, I really want to study abroad for a semester. So I did a ton of research. I figured out how I could go for a semester, and I realized that I needed to save about $10K, and I had $1,000 or $2,000 in my savings account, I think from my graduation party in high school. So I was okay, I need to save $8,000 to go do this next year. So over the course of the year, I saved $8,000. And by the time I studied abroad, I had $10,000 in my savings account. And at the time, that's a very short term, how can I save money to be able to do something next year, right? Well, I come back, and at that point, I was okay with my money, but I was okay, the only thing that I'm really doing is maybe I can put aside a little bit of extra money so that I can start paying off my student loans a little bit, or just things like that. It was very well, if I have extra money, I'll maybe put it towards my dad, or maybe I'll throw it in my savings account. And I feel I never just had money didn't play that big of a role in my life at that point until I really started learning about personal finance and learning about sort of it's the financial independence movement. I had a boyfriend in college that was really into all of that, and it started to kind of open my eyes to, instead of being okay, well, the only time I really have to be diligent about saving money is when I have this very definitive savings goal that I need to save for. It opened my mind to be no, if you can be saving and investing your money when you don't have immediate things to save for, then you really can big picture and over the long term inevitably use your money to buy back your time and gain true freedom in your life. And that became really inspiring to me. So sort of that shift between okay, let's save some money right now to do something right now or next year, to okay, let's always be diligent about our money, because one day I will have enough money in my investment portfolio to take the dream 1 year time off of work to go take a huge trip or something, or I will be able to stop working full time and maybe only work part time, or only work on this business venture or something like that.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been very money conscious. I always have been since a very young age, and I like we won't get into all of that, but like I feel like I remember when I was 12, I had saved pretty much every bit of money that had ever been gifted to me, like whether it was like the $5 my grandma would give me for my birthday or like a birthday present someone would give me or Christmas gift or whatever it was. I saved like every dollar from it. I remember when I'd be at the grocery store with my parents and they would use cash to pay for stuff, I would ask if I could keep the change and I like the coins or whatever, and I would store it all away. And so when I was 12, I remember I had saved $720 and I went and deposited it into my first savings account. And it's kind of like sad in a way to look back. Like, I think in the moment, it's like, oh, like I'm so young and I'm being so diligent and everything. But it was coming from like this place of scarcity where I was like, I have to save every dollar and I have to like, yeah, I wasn't really like ever allowing myself to spend. And that translated into college where I had money saved from like high school jobs that I had. And then when I was in college, I didn't have a job my freshman year, but I was employed like my sophomore, junior, and senior year. And my senior year, I had like multiple jobs, and my junior year, I had multiple jobs, and I would save so much of it. Like when my like friends were buying like expensive dresses for sorority formals or like things like that, I was like, no, I'm gonna buy like the cheapest dress I can find on sale because I want to like save my money. And it was just coming from a place of scarcity. It was coming from a fear of never having enough and like stashing money away because of that fear. And then when I was like an RA in college, I feel like I started to get a taste of, or RA stands for resident assistant, in case anyone doesn't know, but I started to get a taste of like trading, not just trading time for money in the sense where you clock in, you clock out. And I went to school in Connecticut where you would make $10.10 an hour. That was the minimum wage, 10.10. So it's like you're clocking in for an entire hour, you're making
Mine
$10.
was 7.25.
Oh my God, that's insane. That's actually
And I had
insane.
a couple different 7.25 jobs.
In Massachusetts, I think it was like 11 something when I went to college. So it felt like I was like, what the heck? I'm making $10 for an hour. It felt crazy. But I like as an RA, part of your compensation as an RA, you get like a free room, like a free single, which is like several $1,000s, and then you get a stipend. And then of course you have like a job description, you're like expected to do certain things, but it isn't like a clock in, clock out type of role where every time you clock in you get $10 or like whatever, like for working an hour. And I think that started to open my eyes a little bit to, okay, if I like am really efficient about the way that I do this, or if I like develop certain systems, I don't have to then trade my time for money. And also at the same time, ever since I was 13, I watched content creators on YouTube and I wanted to be a content creator. And part of the reason why was because I would see that they kind of had these like flexible lifestyles where they weren't trading time for money. They didn't have to like clock in, clock out, or be expected to be sitting in a cubicle from 9 to 5. And that was really what I wanted. But I started to realize that in order to have that life, I couldn't keep that scarcity mindset. Like I had to be able to step outside of that because ultimately, to live that type of life, I can't view money as like I have to hoard every single dollar. I have to view it as like an abundant resource and as something that is going to help me create that life and create, yeah, the life that I genuinely want to live. And I think that was like a major shift
Mhm.
for me going from that scarcity to that abundance. And also, then that kind of taught me that if I'm going to save money, I'm going to put something aside, there should be a why behind it. It shouldn't just be, I'm hoarding every single dollar that I make because I'm so afraid everything's going to crumble beneath me, or that there's going to come a day where like my life falls apart, or where I like don't have enough, or where I am like living in poverty or struggling to pay bills or things like that. Like if I kept that mindset, that wasn't going to help me. Like I need to be setting money aside for a specific purpose. And that felt way more meaningful to me because I didn't allow myself really to spend. Like I remember my mom would always be like, why are you this expression? I've said this expression before, and some people are like, what the frick? But it's something my mom said growing up. She'd be like, why are you like hemming and hawing over like buying something? I said this in front of someone one time and they were like, what are you saying? I was like, you don't say that. I don't
No,
know.
I've never heard that.
Oh my God. Yeah. My mom would always be like, why are you like hemming and hawing over buying like a $20
Oh my
shirt?
gosh.
Like she'd be like, you literally have like the money to buy a $20 shirt. And I'd be like, but like, is it worth
Mhm.
$20? Like I would always like be, yeah, just like in
Yeah.
that mindset. But then it's like when you have money set aside for a specific purpose because you're using it as a tool, then you can indulge in like those things. You're not sitting there like contemplating if a $20 shirt is worth it, because you know that you are actively using your
Mhm.
money to create a life that you enjoy, and you don't feel like you have to hoard every single dollar.
Yeah, and I know for me, this is like such a balance that I strike, and something that I still like find myself actively trying to balance and making sure I'm not leaning in too far in any direction. Because you talked about like the scarcity versus the abundance thing. And I definitely find myself like setting my financial goals from a scarcity mindset sometimes. So for me, and I said, like, in college, I came back from my semester abroad and I really didn't have like a definitive plan with my money for the first like or for that next like year. I wasn't really saving a lot of money because I just really didn't see, I didn't have any financial goals that I was trying to set. Well, then I learned about like all of the financial independence stuff and really learning about personal finance and people who are investing and real estate investors that are able to quit their job and like live off of their rental income and all of that stuff that is in like the personal finance space. And that became really inspiring to me because I like have really only grown up around people who have worked really traditional career paths. You know, my parents are in their mid 60s and they're still not retired. They're still trying to figure out how they can retire. They've spent their entire life trading their time for money. And I just really didn't know that there was another way to do it. So it was so fascinating to me. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is something that I really want to take seriously in my 20s so that by the time I'm in my 30s and 40s and 50s, I'm building more flexibility into my life because I've used money to earn that. But on the flip side, now that I'm in my mid 20s, I'm just trying to become like, I am a full time entrepreneur, but I am going down that entrepreneurship path. I definitely find myself investing my money from a place of like, well, I want to have a huge investment portfolio so that if like my business fails and I don't make a like money for a year, I have a bunch of money in my investment portfolio and that's fine. And I'm not saying that like it's inherently a bad thing to obviously have emergency funds and have money invested and all of those things. That's not a bad thing, but it's important to like view your investments, your financial goals from like a positive place of like, I'm doing this because when I'm in my 30s and I have kids, I want to be able to spend time with them. And if that means that my business is taking way too much time and I would rather hire someone and make significantly less money or like not even take a profit from my business, that's fine because I have the money to do that because I prioritize my time over making active income. And that's like really the balance that I'm trying to strike, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been, I value freedom and I value my life feeling expansive. Like, I don't want to feel constricted in any way. That's like the life that I'm after. And I think my focus has been a lot on the increasing active income side of it as a way to be able to have more active income to like invest or to spend on, like, for example, moving into the apartment that I have right now. That like that was a goal. Like, I was like, I want to be able to, I don't want to move into an apartment that like I don't love living in. I don't want to move into like a teeny tiny 1 bedroom or studio. I want my apartment to feel expansive. So like, how can I increase my active income so that I can afford that apartment, pay for that apartment, whatever, so that I can like do the specific things or experience the specific things I want to. And of course, like part of that is like investing and like, yeah, getting to a place where it's like, if I do have a family and kids, when family and kids are the same thing. Well, I guess not technically, but I'm using them the same
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Like having like a family or kids or whatever, having a house, like I can like take some time off to just like enjoy. Or especially with us, I always think about this with us being self-employed, like we don't have the traditional maternity leave, or like
Mm-hmm.
there's still gonna be like people asking things of us or whatever, if we, unless we decide to put our businesses like on pause for a second. And like being able to be in a place financially where you have things like running in the background, or like you're at a point where your business is profiting so much to where you can hire people to handle it while you're out on maternity leave, or where like your investments are paying you enough to cover your bills or whatever, so you can take a maternity leave, or you can't, like that stuff I feel like
Mm-hmm.
is important. But I think it goes back, like for me, it goes back to the like, why do I want money to begin with? Like I, and this, we could do a whole episode on this too, but I, ever since I was young, I always knew like in my heart and soul that I was just like meant for a big life. I never saw, like when
Mm-hmm.
I envisioned my life, I never saw myself being like working in a 9 to 5 the rest of my life. I always knew I wanted like big, like
Mm-hmm.
really crazy
Yeah.
expansive life. And when I think about that though, when I think about like why I want money, it's to be able to live that life. Like, and I think I've mentioned this on social media before, and I feel like sometimes I get people who are like, they're like, I just want to be able to like live a simple life, pay my
And
bills,
that's
pay my,
amazing.
no, it's not me.
It's not
That's not
me.
me. I don't want a simple life.
Yeah.
I want to pull up to my kid's soccer game in the Porsche. I want to have like the big house where like everybody in the neighborhood wants to come over and hang out with, you know, and like all my kids want to have their friends over and like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to like cover my kids' tuition in college. I don't want them to ever have to take out student loan debt like I did. Like I want to be able to retire my mom early, buy my
Yeah.
parents a house, pay my brother's student loan debt off. Like I like there's big goals that are there. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why is because those things feel very expansive to me. Like that when I think about like I want to be a mom someday. And when I think about having a house with like my little kids running around, all of their friends, and like everyone's just like so
Mm-hmm.
joyful and enjoying my space, and my house feels like warm and welcoming, that literally lights me up, makes me feel so warm and fuzzy inside. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like when you think about that and you think about that life though, and then you think about, okay, what do I need to make that life happen? Money is sometimes like that's the gap, you know what I mean? And so for me, I've thought so much about increasing my active income because of that why. Like I want to live a really big expansive life. I don't want a simple life. I need money to make that happen. Like the Porsche ain't gonna buy
Mm-hmm.
itself. You know what I mean? The house is not gonna buy itself. Like I have to and I want to make the money to be able to live that.
We are so excited to announce that the Life You Love community is going international. In February of 2025, we are hosting an international group trip and retreat to Colombia with EF Ultimate Break. If you've never traveled with EF Ultimate Break before or have never taken a group trip before, think 1 week surrounded by 20 to 40 like-minded women that can truly become your best friends. I've taken countless group trips in my life, and it's the perfect way to travel more even if you don't have anyone to travel with or if planning the trips and figuring out the logistics of the trip stresses you out. In Colombia, we're having a week of sightseeing, beaches, boats, and of course, building a community of like-minded women, which we could not be more excited about. If you want to see the full trip itinerary, learn more, or book the trip, we'll put the link in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, definitely. That is 100% the same kind of like thought process that I took with it. I remember when I finished my semester in Europe, I was 19 years old at the time, and I literally cried in the taxi on the way to the airport after the semester was over because
Aw.
I literally was like crying, being like, I'm about to graduate from college in 2 years, and I am never going to have a 4 month period
Mhm.
where I can just go like run around Europe and not have a job and not and literally
Yeah.
spend all of my time like the way that I want to spend it, exploring, shopping, eating, traveling. I was like, I will never have a 4 month period. I was like, I'm gonna go start my corporate job and have 1 week off a year and go to the beach on that 1 week if I'm
Mhm.
lucky, and that's going to be my life. And I literally was like crying about that at 19 years old. And then I started my first full-time job out of college. I absolutely hated it. My schedule was, I've talked about this so many times, but like my schedule I hated traveling for work. I just like was not in a good place, and I was like, I cannot imagine doing this for the next 40 to 50 years of my life. And I like saw money as the one thing that was going to buy back my time. One of the first financial books that I read in college, I think I read it like that summer when I got back from Europe, was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I know this book gets a lot of hate because I think the author is like kind of controversial or
Oh,
something.
really?
Yeah, I'm pretty
I've never
sure. I
read
think he's
it.
like filed bankruptcy
Oh,
or something. Yeah, like
I've never read it. I don't know.
but the lessons in the book are so good, and like I do recommend it. Just it's one of my top 3 financial books that I recommend to literally everyone, because the whole idea of the book is he's comparing his rich dad and his poor dad, and he's like, his actual dad is who he calls like, quote, it's all like fictitious characters, like
Oh,
this isn't like his actual life story, but like his poor dad is his actual dad, and his poor dad is, and I like hate using these terms because like, but this is what he
yeah.
uses in the book. He grew up in like a middle class household. His family, I think his parents were both teachers or something, and they were just like working until they retired, and like that was that, right? And that's how he grew up. He just like didn't know there was any other way. His poor dad, quote unquote, used his active income to fund their lifestyle, right? To buy the things, buy the liabilities, buy the car, all of the things. He said his rich dad, who was his friend's dad, so he was like, I would go over to my friend's house all the time, and his rich dad, I would like try to learn from him and like learn what he was doing. His rich dad used his active income, his salary, to buy assets that inevitably give him money to fund his lifestyle. So it's like you're taking your active income, you're buying an asset, those assets are producing income. So not just buying an asset, but buying an income producing asset, because the book talks about the difference between the two. So let's say an asset is a primary home, something that does appreciate in value, yes, but that's not giving you any income unless you go and sell your primary home, and you need somewhere to live. So like even if you sell it, you're going to buy a different house. Like it's not giving you anything tangible. But an income producing asset, whether that's an income generating business, a real estate investment property, like a rental property, something like that, that actually gives you tangible income that you can use to go fund your lifestyle. And like you do that little kind of like loop until you can take the active income completely out of the equation. So that was sort of like the lesson of the book, and that literally blew my mind as like a 19-year-old that also came from a very middle class, like normal household, doesn't know anyone in their personal life that does anything other than work a traditional job. Like knowing that that was like what wealthy people were doing, like totally blew my mind.
Yeah. I think it's like one of those things too, like you were saying, where it depends on what you're like surrounded with and also like what you like and enjoy. You know what I mean? I feel like, yeah, like for some people, owning like that primary home is really important, and some people want to own a second home and make like income from that, or like a business, or like for me, like I'm 25, I don't really have a desire to like own a
Mm-hmm.
house right now. I don't want to do that like right now at this point in my life, but like I'm investing a lot of time and investing my money back into my business
Yeah.
so I can like grow that and grow certain aspects of it that produce income in the background, like passively, or you know what I mean, like stuff like that, so that I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
trade my time for money. But I also, it's interesting because owning my business, yes, I put time into it every day, but I don't necessarily view it as like trading time for money
Yeah,
because,
because it's your
yeah,
business.
because it's my business, but and also because like I don't clock in and clock out. Like I don't have to, yes, I don't, it's like almost like I don't have to show up every day. Like I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I choose to, but I'm not like forced to like show up to a job at 9 and like clock out at 5 or whatever, or like there's no like rigid schedule. And I genuinely
Mm-hmm.
feel like the work I'm putting in is actually creating an ROI for me
Mm-hmm.
beyond just the money that I'm getting like paid, to
Yeah.
where like the stuff that I'm doing today is, yes, it's generating me money today, but it's also like creating, like if I want to sell my business like 5 years down the line, like there's aspects of it I could sell, or
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what I mean? Like it's generating me like a
Mm-hmm.
longer term ROI
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Thinking about like the income producing assets from the business front, it's like, how are you setting up a business that one day you could completely remove yourself from and still generate money from that, whether that's selling your business or like completely delegating everything to where you are a passive, like, recipient of the income that the
Yeah.
business is generating.
And just two, the things that like I'm doing today in a way kind of compound on itself, like
Mm-hmm.
where, for example, like I'm spending time setting up like a webinar funnel with my course.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to function in the back. Once I like get that going, that just
Mm-hmm.
earns income in the back. Or like with our social media pages, arguably the longer you do it, the better it gets, the more you can make, the
Mm-hmm.
more you get your systems down, then the less time you're spending on it, but then you're making more, like that type of thing too. It's like how people have like Airbnb businesses or like rental properties. They get to a point where like they buy the first one, they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty much running the whole show, it's earning them income, but then like, so they're kind of trading their time for money in that sense, but at the same time, then as like they start to own more of those and they're taking themselves slowly out of the equation a little bit, and they have property managers or things like that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, then the business as a whole is making them more, and they're no longer having to like do the like nitty gritty tasks, if that makes sense, or where they have to like show up every day for it. Like it becomes more
Yeah.
flexible too.
No, 100%. And I think that's like kind of because ultimately, this whole episode, we're talking about sort of like the evolution around our mindset around money. And something that I'm just now starting to realize over the last like year or so is really how much everything compounds. And like, obviously, one of the first rules that you learn about money when you're trying to get your financial shit together is like compound interest and like all of that. You invest your money today and like 30 years from now, it compounds and all of that stuff. But I think like taking steps towards wealth building, things just snowball so much quicker than you would expect them to in ways that you don't really understand. So, for example, we have a lot of episodes out or like coming out in the podcast about like side hustles and like managing multiple things and like starting businesses and all of that. And you don't realize how much that all compounds and snowballs to the point where like you get to a point where it's the entire idea of like making your money work for you, and once it starts working for you, the it's such an easier lift than it was in the beginning. And that's been super inspiring to me because I know like when you're first getting started on your financial journey, it's like so overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I have all of the student loan debt to pay off and like I have no money saved and they tell me I need a $20,000 emergency fund, and like that's so overwhelming. But like just like taking those steps, and now I'm like 6 or so years into my money journey, like seeing how fast that starts to snowball once you do start building something for yourself. I know we had an episode come out a couple of weeks ago with Kate Robb. We just interviewed her as a part of our sort of like 6-figure side hustle series. We're trying to interview entrepreneurs that are doing really amazing things and making 100 grand plus with their entrepreneurship journey. And Kate came on and she made a comment that I really love. She said that when she got laid off from her corporate job, she took her first year of entrepreneurship as sort of like a self-funded master's degree, because she was like, okay, I really want to like take my entrepreneurship seriously and I want to learn all of these skills that I can go use to like make more money. But the only reason why she was able to do that is because she was either already making money or already had money in her investment account, in her savings account. So like I think that's a really good example of how things start to snowball outside of just like, well, I have money in an investment portfolio, so compound interest is working for me. It's like, no, once you're already making a little bit of money from a side hustle, or once you're already making so much money from your side hustle that you can quit your corporate job to buy back your time, not to go sit on a beach, but to go learn a new skill to add another side hustle in. So now all of that is snowballing and you can build wealth at such a faster pace because you're doing all of these different things.
I think even too, I think a lot about the active income side of it because I feel like that's like we've had conversations about this too, where like I I don't really see myself like retiring really. Like I think I'll probably work until I'm like old and decrepit and like can't even like stand up straight because I just genuinely enjoy it. And I don't necessarily like have a desire at this time or see myself having a desire to like take a year or two off like work. Like I genuinely enjoy doing it. But I think a lot about the active income side of it where it's like how can I actually use the active income, yes, to like invest and like, you know, do all that too, but like to make my life feel more expansive and not necessarily in terms of like buying things that you're just buying for the sake of it. Like I'm not like, oh, like having like a Louis Vuitton is going to make me feel so expansive and rich. Like let me go. No, but like in terms of like prioritizing like peace and like freedom and choice and things like that, like for example, being able to like one goal that I have in the coming year or two or whatever is to like when I buy a house, I want to be able to pay to have like a cleaner come by so that I'm not cleaning, like spending hours cleaning the house like every single week. Like, yes, I would obviously keep it clean, but like being able to get more of my time back in
Mm-hmm.
my day or being able to like get an apartment in like the area that I want to live in because that feels expansive to me and that energy just like impacts like the work that I do and like the output and just impacts like my happiness overall. And I think that was a big mindset shift for me in terms of like I would used to look at my budget and you can go back actually and look at like my budget videos from a long time ago and you can see I remember when I started my business. I remember I had this 1 month. It was I mean there was a few months that were like in a row and I had like high months in my business and for like at that point in time. And I remember there were a couple months in a row where I put like thousands of dollars onto my student loan debt in each month. Like one of the months I remember in my budget I had I think it was $250 for fun. That was dining out, entertainment, shopping, anything. And then I put like $7,000 onto my student loan debt. And that's amazing, right? Like, okay, go me, like putting 7 grand, whatever. But it was coming from a place of like scarcity of like, what if next month everything falls apart? Or what if like it all crumbles? Or what if like my business crumbles and then I can't make my loan payment, which my loan payment at the time was literally, I think collectively it was like $500 between all of my debt. Like I was fine. Um, but I think that a big mindset shift for me has been like, yeah, like how can I use money as a tool for today, tomorrow, and down the line to be able to live the life I want to live today, tomorrow, and in the
Mm-hmm.
future, and striking a balance between that because I feel like I oscillated from like one end of the spectrum right to the other. Well, not fully to the other side, but I kind of was on one side where I was like, I must save and invest every single dollar that I like have, and I would literally live like in such a mode of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
and that was not conducive to like, and you think about these people who like are the entrepreneurs that own like multiple businesses and aren't, they work 10 hours a week but they make millions of dollars a year or whatever it is, like they're not sitting there in a scarcity mindset, like they're
Yeah.
not hoarding their cash, like they're putting it towards things that make them a life that they enjoy. And I think that was helpful for me. And one like practical thing that I did to start to really think that through was like getting clear on like what does a life I love actually look like in terms of like, okay, it feels like this, I want to live here maybe, or like thinking through those things and then thinking through like what do I need? Like, how much money do I
Yeah. What
actually
does that
need to
cost?
make that happen?
Yeah.
What is the cost of that? And this is like a manifestation thing too, but I always create like a mock
Yeah.
budget
That's
in
a,
my budget
mm-hmm.
template. And so I just make an extra tab. If you have either of our budget templates, if you've bought either of them, you can do it in
Mm-hmm.
either of our budget templates. But yeah, I just made an extra tab. Like, I duplicated one of the month tabs and then I just like plugged in, okay, if I like, I was doing this literally recently because I'm like debating moving to San Diego, and I was like, if I want to live there, I need $3,000 a month for rent, and I need this much for utilities, this for all these other things in the budget based on the lifestyle that I want to live if I move there, and what does my post-tax income need to be for me
Mm-hmm.
to be able to afford that? Okay, what needs to change between where I'm at and that to be able to make that happen? Because ultimately, I'm not looking at money in a sense of like, I have to hoard it, or
Mm-hmm.
I want to make money for simply the sake of making money. I'm like, I want to make more money so that I can live this life. And that includes saving money and investing and all of those things. It's not just about the spending aspect of it, but yeah, that's like, if I want to
Mm-hmm.
live there and have the apartment that I want and still invest at the amount that I do and save the amount that I do or save even more or whatever it is, that's how much I need to
Mm-hmm.
have post tax. And that is so motivating, like especially for me as someone who like, I don't like, I think a lot of people when it comes to, how do I say this in a way that I don't want this to come off like self-centered or mean, like, guys, just remember that you think I'm so nice, okay? You think I'm a good person and you like me, you're like, Grace is so nice.
Grace is so nice.
I feel like I've always like, Erin, like I'm gonna say something and I don't want it to sound mean. She's like, Grace, you're not mean at all.
Yeah.
But like, I have, like I said, I've always seen myself as someone living like a really big expansive life. I know in the depths of my soul that there's going to be a point in time in my life where I'm making so much money I don't even
Mm-hmm.
know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so I have this like sense of just like peace and confidence and security in
Mm-hmm.
that. And so I don't, like, I invest enough right now that if I invested the same amount every single month until I retire, I'd retire with like 4 point something million dollars. Like, that I don't need to, I would be fine with
Mm-hmm.
less, you know what I mean? Of course, $4 million is wonderful, but I know also that like in 2 years' time, I could literally be, I will have enough that like I'll be making enough in active income that I could literally just chuck it into an account and retire.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel like this pressure as where I think maybe for people who are in more of a traditional 9 to 5 where like your active income is a little bit more fixed maybe than like
Mm-hmm.
the way that I'm thinking about my income, which, and entrepreneurship is not for everyone. So I'm not saying that like no one, like you have to be doing the most or do
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship. No, don't get it
Yeah.
twisted. But I think that I think of it a little bit different. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm thinking about what can I do now to increase my active income? And part of that is using money as a tool to, like, for example, moving into my apartment. I make more money now that I live in my apartment,
Mm-hmm.
even though I spend more. I spent $0 to live at my parents' house every month. I spend $2,400 a month on my apartment.
Mhm.
That apartment, I'm so much more creative. I create much better content. Like I just, it feels so much more expansive that impacts my energy and the way that I like run my business and the
Yeah.
money I'm able to make. So like I'm reinvesting it, but I'm not always necessarily investing into how do does this sound weird to say? I view myself as an income producing asset.
No,
Where
that
like
yeah,
I'm
well,
like
like a business
yeah.
is an income
Or
producing asset.
even
Like,
just like
yeah.
me as an
Mhm.
individual. Like
Yeah.
I'm like for
The book
me,
Rich Dad Poor Dad does talk a lot about the idea of investing in yourself. And I know we did an entire episode on money mindset tips. So if
yeah.
you're like listening to this and you're like, I want more tips, like I want to change my mindset, I want to be the person that thinks that like thinks how we think, because like
Yeah.
you genuinely do have to think that you are capable of the things that we're talking about in order to actually achieve them. So definitely go back and listen to that episode. But in that episode, we talked about how an investment in yourself is the only investment that won't be taxed. And like
Yeah.
that's how you should think about it. You should think about it as like, when I'm investing into myself, that money is going to come back to me times 10. And like obviously do a lot of reflection into like what's spending and
Hmm.
what's an investment in
Yeah.
terms of investing into yourself. We're not saying to go and like just like max out your credit card on a bunch of
Hmm.
clothes because you're
Yeah.
investing into
Yeah.
yourself. Like we're not
No.
saying that. Obviously be realistic. But I do think too, because you made a comment about like this, I think about it like this because I'm an entrepreneur and my income is less fixed than maybe someone in a corporate job. I had this mindset when I worked my corporate job. And this was the first job that I had out of college, the job where I was traveling a lot, and I had a salary. I was making, my starting salary out of college was $58,000 a year. And at the time I was paying $650 in rent because I had 3 roommates in a 4 bedroom apartment. I had a car payment for about $300 a month. My student loan payment was $350 a month. So those were like roughly my fixed expenses, right? So when you add all of that up for my take home pay, like there wasn't a ton left over. But I did the mock budget thing, and that's something that I do all the time. And I love that tip so much because what it does, and what we say when we mean mock budget, is when you're looking at a budget template, a spreadsheet, a budgeting app, fill in everything except the income. So fill
Yeah.
in like your ideal rent, if you had your dream apartment, your ideal rent, your how much you would be spending on utilities in your dream life. Realistically, how much would you be spending every single month shopping? How much would you be spending going out to eat with your friends, on travel? Like really put those numbers in an expansive way of like, if I was living my dream life, this is how much I would want to spend, and look at it from like, okay, all of that combined, I would need to make X amount. I did that back then. I did that for my rent, my car payment. I put in the fact that I wanted to max out my Roth IRA every month. And then I was kind of looking at it and like, what is that gap between my salary and then my kind of like dream lifestyle at this point in my life? And it wasn't my dream lifestyle of like 10 years from now,
Yeah.
my dream lifestyle. It was my dream lifestyle of like, I would be going to the bars with my friends on the weekends. I would be maxing out my Roth IRA. I would be, you know what I mean? It was realistic for that point in my life, but it really allowed me to see the gap. And I think the gap was like it didn't end up being insane. It was like maybe $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Well, I kind of like learned how to cover that gap between, I traveled for work, so I got per diem, and I got $72 a day every single time that I traveled, like every day that I traveled. And I traveled most days out of the month. So I was like, well, if I can be more strategic around like, I meal prepped a lot of my meals so that I wasn't eating out a lot, just
Hmm.
little things like that, to where I got to pocket a lot of that $72 a day. That right there would cover like $1,400 a month, it ended up being. So it's kind of just like being creative about like what your dream life and like the life that you would love at this day to day, like how can you make that work, and how can you kind of like cover that gap?
Because I think the ultimate point that we are trying to make and that we've tried to make with the whole podcast and on our pages and every time we talk about money is that money is not, it's not just like, it should, you're supposed to use it for things that you want. It's supposed to be a tool. You're supposed to like
Mm-hmm.
use it to create, like if you're just hoarding it or just like just spending all of it or like even investing all of it, but there has to be a purpose behind
Mm-hmm.
like what you're doing with it, because otherwise it's just like why do you even have it? And like it's kind of interesting because we think about that when it comes to like other things that we buy, like you buy a toothbrush to brush your teeth to have have white teeth, have clean teeth, or you like go and get your hair done to like not have like split ends, like or
Yeah.
to feel more confident to whatever. So it's like you go to work and you make money For why? What's the
Yeah.
reason? What, like, why are you doing it? Like, what does that actually look like? And the second that you have that mindset shift where you realize, okay, yes, I do have bills to pay and whatever. I have these things that I like need to do, whatever. So yes, I go to work so that I can pay my bills. But like, why are you paying those bills? Why are you paying like the rent that you're paying? Why are you like, it's probably because like you want to be in your own apartment, or like you want to have like water, you want to have electricity, you want to
Mhm.
have like, you know what I mean, that's the life that you want to live, because ultimately you could go live somewhere else, you know what I mean, you
Yeah.
could keep the lights off 24/7, you could never turn the water on, like, you know what I mean, like it could be different, you could go live with 5 roommates and whatever and not pay like the rent that you do to live alone, or whatever the situation is. And it's like, you you go to work and make money for a reason.
Mhm.
So like, how are you then taking that and using it to create a life that you love today, but then also, what is that, like, what is the end goal? And you
Mhm.
don't have to know like the end goal, but like, where do you want to be in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And how are you then like taking the money that you're earning today and like putting it to work and making your money work hard for you, so that that life that you want to live can actually become a reality down the
Yeah,
line.
definitely. I do love this topic so much. And I know you guys love this topic too, because our money mindset episode was like one of
Yeah.
our most popular and highest performing episodes. So if there's anything else that you want us to cover on this topic, we can totally do another money mindset tip episode or something, or a money mindset Q&A or something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines, because like we said in our rebrand episode, money is still a huge pillar of the Life You Love podcast. We do realize that money is ultimately a huge determining factor of what your life looks like. And when you're building your dream life, money is a huge factor of that. So we do want to continue talking about this. So leave us any questions or feedback or episode ideas in Spotify, or you can also DM us at the Life You Love podcast if you want to chat about it more. But thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the podcast. And until next week.